Okay, so thank you all for being here today. We have a presentation, Finding the Right Fit, and it is going to be presented by Mr. Ethan Olson, Associate Director from with the International Admissions from University of St. Thomas in Minnesota. We did talk about a little bit well, at least with some of the students, I did talk about this is a private university, very good university. I think I touched up on some of the programs. So I'm sure some of you will have questions for Mr. Ethan, but keep those at the end, give him a chance to present, and then we'll go ahead with the questions. Go ahead, Ethan. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much. So thank you to all. Can you see my screen right now? It's on the PowerPoint.
Yeah, we can.
Very good, thank you. So thank you for joining. Very happy to speak to you today. Today we're going to talk about finding the right fit. So this is a term that we often use when we're talking about how to find the university that's right for you. You know, there's here in the United States, there's something around 4,000 colleges and universities here. And so there's obviously many choices, many schools to choose from. It can be very difficult, very overwhelming, obviously, trying to find one or two or three that are suitable for you. There's lots of factors that we need to talk about. The most important thing to remember is that, you know, finding a school that's right for you may not be the same thing that's right for your friends and your classmates and somebody else, you know. So it's very important to think about what you are looking for and what will be best suited for your goals and your lifestyle and everything else. And so, well, today we're going to talk about, these are some of the factors we're going to talk about. So we're going to learn about different types of school, location, academics, extracurricular activities, costs, and rankings. And most of the photos you see here in my presentation are from my school, which was mentioned is the University of St. Thomas, located in St. Paul, Minnesota. So it's very important for you to know about the different types of schools that are available here in the United States. It might be a little bit different from back in your home country and from other countries like the UK and Australia and Canada. So there can be some differences in these types of schools. One thing I want to point out is very important for you to keep in mind is we have these two words, college and university. Sometimes students get confused on what this means and what's the difference. So I want to make sure that we're clear about that. So here in the USA, college or university, the two words are often used interchangeably. I know in some countries, college can actually mean a high school, right? And then in other countries, college is considered a lower level of quality compared to university. So like university is better than college. But here in the United States, that is not the case. The real difference between college and university is that a college, if you see college in the name of the school, you know, for example, here in Minnesota, we have the College of St. Benedict's, St. Olaf College. These are the names of schools here in Minnesota. Those schools are not a lower level than schools that have university in the name. The difference is that colleges are focused on only undergraduate students. So they only give bachelor degrees or associate's degrees. So they do not have any master's degree programs or PhD programs or anything like that. That's really what the difference is. And so if you see college, don't don't disregard that school because you think it's a lower level school. That's simply not true. There's many examples where a college could be a very prestigious institution that's much more prestigious than another institution that's called a university. So that's very important to keep in mind. And then we often use the terms interchangeably. For example, somebody here in the US might say, oh, where are you going to college? And you might say, oh, I'm going to the University of St. Thomas. And so, or you might say, I go to college at the University of St. Thomas. And so we kind of use those words interchangeably for any school that happens after high school. So post-secondary, a post-secondary institution. Anyway, moving on, a liberal arts college. This is a term that you might hear about. Liberal arts colleges are generally smaller. They are four-year colleges, so they issue 4 bachelor degrees. And they're typically smaller, focused only on undergraduate students, as I mentioned. And the general idea of a liberal arts college is that you get a very well-rounded education. So you typically don't focus too much on one field of study. You know, you have a major, you might major in biology, but you're also going to study many other subjects in literature, history, the languages, the humanities and arts, and you get really a well-rounded education at a liberal arts college. We have public universities. We mentioned already that St. Thomas is a private university. And this is another place where students in some countries get confused. I'm not sure in your country, but in some countries, public universities are considered to be better than private. And then in other countries, the other way around. Here in the US, we do not have any sense that one is better than the other. There are many private universities that, if you look at the top ranked universities like Harvard and Stanford and Princeton, these are private universities. But there's also public universities that are ranked very highly as well. And so the main difference is that public universities are supported by the government and private universities are not. More generally here in the United States, public university systems are run by the state. So like the state of Minnesota, for example, has 2 public university systems. We have the University of Minnesota system and the Minnesota State Colleges system, state colleges and university system, and they're supported by the government. Now, for your purposes, generally speaking, public universities tend to be bigger and have a lower cost because the government is subsidizing them, so they're able to offer the education at a lower cost. And then private universities, on average, are smaller and usually have a higher cost. And private universities are often, not always, but often have a religious affiliation. For example, St. Thomas is a Catholic university. That's not always the case, but often. Then we have pre-professional colleges. These are colleges where you get a training in a very specific career. For example, if you want to be an electrician or a designer, you want to design, graphic design or art, they can be very specific to one job. Then we have something called community college. Now, this is an interesting opportunity. Some international students choose to go this way. A community college is a 2-year college. So a community college, sorry, my son is playing video games in the background here. So, a community college is a 2-year college. And so what typically happens is you go to the community college for 2 years, and you earn something called an associate's degree. In some countries, they call this a diploma. And then after earning the 2-year associate's degree, the student can choose to go find a job, or oftentimes the students will transfer to a 4-year college or university and then continue maybe 2 more years and earn their bachelor degree. And students choose to do that for many reasons. A big reason is cost. The community colleges are much cheaper. Another reason is that it's easier to be admitted. So if students maybe don't have very good grades from high school, they can choose to go to a community college, and then if they're successful in the community college, get a good GPA, good grades, then they can transfer to a more prestigious college or university. So it's important for you to think about, based on your goals and your personality, which type might be most suitable for you. The next thing you're going to want to think about is the location. Now, as you know, the United States is a very large country. We are large both in population and in land area. And so there's many different types of places. Every place is quite different. There's a lot of regional diversity in the United States. And it's going to be important for you to choose a location that's suitable for you, to make sure that you have the opportunities that you want available to you, and also that you are in an environment that is suitable to you so you can be successful in your studies. Probably one of the most important things to consider is an urban setting versus a rural setting. So some students much prefer to be in a big city. Maybe they like the activity, they like going out to, shopping and clubs and museum, whatever the case may be. And other students just don't. Other students feel more comfortable in a quiet setting that might be rural or a small town. And so it's important for you to think about which one is right for you. And there's many colleges in both urban and rural settings across the United States. Population, obviously, the United States has a big population, but it's very concentrated in certain areas. So you'll want to do your research and decide if you like being in a very populated area, you might choose to go to New York City or Los Angeles or Chicago. But that's not for everyone. And so if you like to be in a less crowded place, if you look at other states, like if you can see on my map, these states here in the middle part, if you took North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and Utah, all of these states, and combined their population together, they'd probably have less people than New York City. And so obviously the lifestyle there is very different. The population is much more spread out, and it's going to make your lifestyle very different. And so you want to do some research. If you're choosing a school, do some research on the area to decide if it's suitable for you. Regional culture can be very different. I certainly don't have time now to explain every single region of the United States, but culturally, there's differences between the North and the South. There's differences between the East Coast and the West Coast. And there are cultural differences between urban areas and rural areas. And so you'll find it's very important, I think, that when you're looking at a school, go online, talk to the Education USA advisors, and do some research about what the local culture is like, and decide if it's suitable for you. Climate, of course, we're a big country, and we have many different climate zones here in the United States. So for example, here in Minnesota, we have 4 seasons. It gets very cold in the winter and quite hot in the summer. In fact, it's snowing. I'm looking out my window. It is lightly snowing right now. So for some people that's great, and for some people it's a no-go. So, and then if you went to the Southwest, for example, Arizona, Southern California, New Mexico, Texas, it's very, very hot, desert, hot and dry. It can be more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit or more than 40 degrees Celsius during the summer. And then the Southeast over here, Florida, Louisiana, these places are more subtropical. So it's very hot and humid, wet, a lot of rain. And so you want to choose a place that you think is going to be good for you. Some students want to choose a place, climate that they are accustomed to. So they like to choose a place where the weather is similar to your home, but other students don't. Other students like to choose something that's different. In fact, I have a number of students here at St. Thomas from Vietnam. And obviously Vietnam is tropical, very different from here in Minnesota. But many of the students say that they choose to come here because they want to try something different. And it's a good experience for them to have that experience in a climate that's different from their home. And then how many other international people are there? You know, if you go to a small town somewhere, you might be one of just a few international students. And if you go to a large university in California, for example, there's going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of other international students. And there's advantages and disadvantages to both of those. So you have to think, what do you prefer? You know, do you want to be in a group of friends that are all international students, or do you want to really immerse yourself, excuse me, in the, you know, local culture? If you want to be immersed in the local culture, you might be better off in a smaller town with fewer international students. Safety, this is a big question. I know a lot of students have on their minds about coming to the USA because you see a lot of bad news on TV, I'm sure. It's very important to consider that the safety really, really varies by location. And you want to do your research. So you want to research on the city where you're going to be located. Generally speaking, in the US, the large cities tend to be less safe than the smaller towns or rural areas. But even within a city, you know, if a big city like New York City, for example, there can be certain neighborhoods that have a lot of crime, and there might be other neighborhoods that are very, very safe. And so it's a good idea for you, if you have a university that you're planning to apply to, go online, do some research about the crime rates in those neighborhoods, not just in the state, because within one state, there's many different situations. So you want to look at specifically the neighborhood where that school is located. Is it a safe neighborhood where you can walk around the campus and feel safe? Or is it a neighborhood that you might be a little worried about walking around? And again, I can't tell you about every single place, but you'll want to do research about that for sure. And then convenience. Again, so safety and convenience are often trade-offs. If you're located in a big city that's maybe not as safe, but you might be 10 minutes from the airport and it's very easy for you to travel and easy to go shopping and so forth. Where if you're in a small town, it might be very, very safe and you can walk around and have no worries and there's very little crime, but you might be 2 hours away from the airport. And so traveling will be less convenient. They're going to the shopping mall might be less convenient. And so you want to keep that in your mind about those trade-offs when you're choosing the right place for you. Academics. Now, obviously, I said we have 4,000 colleges and universities here. Everyone is going to be very different. Whatever you want to study, there's probably a school here in the USA that offers it for you. So certainly you want to choose a school that offers your intended major. Obviously, if you plan on studying engineering, don't choose a school that doesn't have engineering. And then some schools are more flexible than others. For example, here in the US, here in Minnesota, my school is University of St. Thomas. Nearby, there's a public school called the University of Minnesota. At St. Thomas, when you apply to the university. You don't apply to one specific major. So if you want to study engineering at St. Thomas, you just apply to St. Thomas, and then you'll be admitted to the university, and then you can choose to study engineering. But at the University of Minnesota, for example, if you want to study engineering, you have to apply to the School of Engineering, and then you'll be either admitted or not admitted to the engineering program. And so at Minnesota, it's less flexible, whereas St. Thomas is more flexible. You could start as an engineer and decide you want to switch to a different school, to a different major, and that, or you could start as a different major and decide you want to switch to engineering. That's something to think about, especially if you're not sure what major you want to do. That's one of the advantages here in the US, actually, is that compared to some other countries, our schools are quite flexible for the most part when it comes to switching your major. Many students come to the school undecided about what major they want to study. And then during the first year, you take some classes, and then in the second year, you decide which major you want to go into. And it's also very common to switch majors. So you might start off doing business and decide, oh, I really don't like business, I want to switch to something else. That's no problem. You can do that here. Whereas some other countries, you can't necessarily do that. This one says, is the school selective? When we say selective, what we mean is how difficult is it to be admitted? So a lot of students make the mistake, I think. They want to go to what they think is the best school, right? And so they tend to choose schools that are very highly selective. For example, you think, I want to go to the US. Okay, I'm going to apply to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Columbia, and Pennsylvania. And you think, okay, there's 6-7 schools. I think I'll get admitted to some of them, right? And then in the end, you get admitted to none of them because those schools are extremely selective. That means that in order to be admitted to those schools, you have to be one of the top students. You have to have very good grades. You have to have a very good SAT score. You have to have you have to have done other things as well to make your application very strong. It's not important that you apply to the most selective schools. You need to apply to schools that are suitable for your qualifications, right? So if you have a 3.0 GPA, I'm not sure if you're familiar with GPAs, but here in the US, 4.0, if you get all A's in all your classes, you're a 4.0 student. If you get all B's in all your classes, you're a 3.0 student. So if you're a 3.0 student and you apply to Harvard, you're not going to be admitted. So you want to think about your GPA, your SAT score, if you have one, and try to find the schools that you have a good chance to be admitted to. It's not that easy to know. One of our disadvantages here in the US is schools are not very transparent about their admission requirements. So colleges here in the US generally do not publish like the GPA requirement, right? So they're not going to say you need a 3.5 GPA to be admitted. Most schools do not do that. So you apply, you don't know what their requirements are. And so it can be difficult to predict. I would definitely advise you to consult with your Education USA advisors, and they can look at your qualifications and they can kind of guide you on which schools are attainable for you. And you can certainly find one. We have schools that will suit anybody. We have schools in the US, even if you got a very, very low scores in your high school, there are schools here that you can go to and you can get a good education. And if you're a top student and you want to be around all the other top students, we have that as well, and everything in between. Something that get talked about a lot is rankings. So the one that's most famous is this US News and World Report, but there are other ones as well. Important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about rankings is that there's no official ranking, right? So it's a lot of students kind of make the mistake and think that this is like a government ranking. It's really not. So these rankings, US News and World Report is a magazine, right? Princeton Review is a magazine. And so these ranking systems were created as a way to interest people into buying magazines, right? So these are not official. Just because one school is ranked number 20 and another school is ranked number 50, absolutely does not mean that the 20 school is better for you, right? It may not be better for you. And so I would strongly suggest you can look at the rankings and kind of get an idea, but my advice would be don't make your decision based on rankings. You can kind of think of it as one part of your decision, but I would not recommend making your final decision just based on the ranking. If you are looking at them, it's also important to think about there's different categories. So if you remember in my first slide, we talked about liberal arts colleges and public and private universities. So in US News and World Report, there's different categories. So there's a category for liberal arts colleges and a separate category for national universities, right? And so colleges that are qualified as liberal arts colleges will not be on the national ranking list. And so I can give you an example from Minnesota here. Here in Minnesota, there's a college called Carleton College, which is a very well-known and prestigious college. Now, if you're looking on the national universities list, you will not find Carleton. So you'll think, oh, it's no good. It's not even on the list. Well, that's not because it's not good. It's because it's in the liberal arts colleges category. And so it's ranked very highly on the liberal arts colleges, but it's just separate from the national universities category. So that's something to keep in mind. And then another thing to keep in mind is individual programs also sometimes have rankings. And so one college might be, maybe the ranking of the university is not very high, but the ranking of the business program is very high. And so those are all things that you'll have to take into consideration if rankings are important for you. Obviously, costs are a very important thing to consider. Here in the US, I'm sure you know, attending college or university can be very expensive. And so it's something that you want to plan for. Also, though, keep in mind, there is a big range. There's a very, very big range of costs. If your family is not able to afford a very high cost school, there probably is a lower cost school that's available to you. And so some things to think about: tuition and fees. Usually schools publish their tuition and fees as an annual cost. So for example, if a school says that the tuition is $40,000, that means for one academic year, so for 2 semesters. So typically you would pay $20,000 in the first semester, $20,000 in the second semester. That when we talk about tuition, that does not include living expenses. So living expenses can also be very substantial, and it's something that you do need to plan for. So, another example, if a school has a tuition of $40,000, they may also have room and board, so housing and food, that cost $20,000. And so the actual full cost might be $60,000. And so you'll have to plan for that as well. That can vary. Living expenses are going to vary widely. This is going to go back to where we talked about location, when you're choosing a location. When you're doing your research on which city you're going to be located in, also take into consideration living expenses. So for example, if you really want to be in New York City, you have to keep in mind that renting an apartment in New York City is going to cost you double or triple or even more than what it might cost you in a smaller town. And so you might be able to live in a small town in Minnesota for $10,000 a year. And New York City, you might be paying $25,000 a year for housing and food. And so you have to do your research about that when you're choosing a location. Scholarships. This is a very, very big question that you're going to be asking. And anybody you talk to at a school, I would strongly encourage you to ask about it. Many of us have it published on our website, but feel free, if you're communicating with the admissions officer, ask about your scholarship opportunities. We talked about earlier about public and private schools. I mentioned that public schools tend to have a lower cost and private schools tend to have a higher cost on average. However, public schools usually, or often I should say, can give bigger scholarships awards. So I'll use my example here in Minnesota. University of St. Thomas has a higher tuition compared to the University of Minnesota. However, University of St. Thomas can also give bigger scholarship awards. So after considering the scholarship, our total cost comes down to be equal or sometimes even less. And so that's something, don't get too scared when you see the price tag of a university. For example, here at St. Thomas, the price tag is for tuition, only for tuition, is about $48,000 per year. And you see that number and you think, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have a heart attack. I can't pay $48,000, right? But you also want to take into consideration that we offer scholarships to international students up to 80% of the tuition. And last year, our average scholarship was more than 50% of tuition, right? So that means our average international students not paying $48,000 in tuition. They're actually paying, more like $24,000 in tuition. And so it's very important to think about that when you're planning. And so if you do have a school that's too expensive for you, maybe don't discard that school immediately until you find out what kind of scholarships they can offer. And then lastly is financial aid and loans. Financial aid for students who are US citizens, our government offers some financial assistance that we call financial aid, and also loans. Generally, those are not available to international students. And so you'll want to keep that in mind when you hear universities talking about their financial aid offers. It's possible that it's not available to you as an international student. And that's something that you'll want to ask about when you're communicating with the admissions officers. Extracurricular activities, here at the colleges here in the US, we have lots and lots of activities for you. Clubs, sports, music, all kinds of things. So if you have something that you are interested in, if you really love, if you love sports, you want to make sure you choose a school that has where you can play the sport that you want to play. And just, take a look. Most of them will be on the websites. If you go through the school website and you want to see what clubs are available, go ahead and do that. And you'd probably be surprised at how many different clubs there are at universities. There's hundreds and hundreds of them it's a good chance for you to continue your hobbies and also to take up a new hobby, and a great way to meet friends as well. And so take that into consideration when you're choosing your school. You might ask, I've told you what to look for in a school, but what is the school looking for in you? So these are some of the things that when universities review your application, or when we're trying to, build our class of students, these are some of the things that we're looking for. Strong academic profile. Obviously, we want students who are going to be successful. We want students who can do well in school and then who are going to graduate and get good jobs and be productive members of society, because that improves the reputation of the university. That's important. Most universities are looking for diversity. So we want to have students from lots of different racial and ethnic backgrounds. We want students from different places. We want students from different countries, different states, and also students with lots of different experience. We're often looking for students who match the culture of the school. So for example, at St. Thomas, our slogan is all for the common good, meaning our students are working not just to help themselves, but they're also working to improve society at large. And so we want students who are also committed to that. And then if you have any special talents like sports, music, art, etc., that can help you as well. We do, if your GPA, your grades in school are not so good, but you're a very, very talented musician, for example, that can help you. And so you want to make sure you communicate that when you're applying to the college, and so they know that, yeah, you're a talented musician. And so that might make you more likely to be admitted, because you bring something that you're going to contribute to the university. One thing I want to mention is test optional admission. This is very popular now here in the US. You're probably familiar with ACT and SAT tests. Many universities now have become test optional, meaning that you don't need to do SAT. And so this is a question you want to ask about the schools you're applying to, is, are you test optional? And so if you don't have an SAT score, that's okay. You choose a test optional school, and then you will be, you can still be admitted without an SAT score. However, if you do have an SAT score, that might help you earn more scholarship award. So those are things you want to think about too. Sometimes I get asked a question is, are international students advantaged or disadvantaged? Meaning, when you apply as an international student, is that to your benefit? Is that an advantage to you to be an international student, or is it a disadvantage, meaning it's more difficult for you to be admitted? The answer is yes. It varies widely by different schools. At some schools like St. Thomas, ACT has never, or SAT has never been required for international students, but you have to take an English test like TOEFL or IELTS or Duolingo to prove your English proficiency. At some schools, international students get bigger scholarships than the US students. But at other schools, you get less scholarship as an international student. At some schools, it's easier to get admitted. At some schools, it's harder to get admitted. It varies. Every school is so different. And you want to think about that when you're communicating. I'm going to skip over that. What can I do now? So I'm not sure what grade you guys are in now. The things you can do now to help you prepare. Number one, keep your grades up. If you have good grades in school, that's going to be probably the most important thing for you in applying. Stay active. I mentioned that schools, we like students who have a lot of activities and participate. You have a lot of things to contribute when you come to the university. And, you know, even if it's early for you, start thinking about what you want. Start thinking about the things that I talked about, like geography, academics, culture. Start thinking about what is most suitable for you. And then when it comes time to apply, you'll have a good idea about what type of place you're looking for. This is just some advice about when you're going through the application process. Number one, it says never plagiarize anything. That means don't ever copy. You know, if you copy an essay off the internet and submit it, that is a big no-no. Make your essays personal and unique. So write things that are personal to you. All communications with admissions departments should be polite. And I said somewhat formal. Many times already in the last few minutes, I've talked about what to ask when you're communicating with the admissions officer. In my opinion, it's very important that you do communicate with the admissions officer. Don't be shy. Send us an email. Ask a lot of questions. Tell us about yourself. You know, all of that back and forth communication is very helpful for you and for us to make sure, you know, we want to help you as best we can. We want to help decide if the school is a good fit for you. And you want to learn more about the school as well, of course. When you're doing that, you don't have to be super formal, but try to be polite and write your messages in a way that makes you seem, you know, seems like you're a serious and a well-qualified student. So you'd be surprised how many messages I get that say, hey, where's my application? Send, you know, and you receive these messages that can come across as not very polite and maybe have a lot of, you know, spelling mistakes, and it's not a good look for you as a student. So you want to make sure that you write a nice message and say, dear Ethan, I have a few questions. Can you help me? Here's my questions. Thank you. And that's great. And then we can have a conversation. And when the time comes for you to apply, I'll probably remember you. I'll say, oh yeah, this is that student from Bosnia that I was communicating with. I remember him. He's an interesting person. And that can be beneficial to you in the application process. Okay, that's what I have for you now. For now, if you have any questions about any of the things that we talked about or about things we didn't talk about, I'm more than happy to answer. And you could feel free to type it in the chat as well if you have anything. No questions?
Looks like there's no questions, or maybe they're shy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a question. It just my connection cut me
Great.
off. So
Go ahead,
No
Sarah.
problem.
So currently I'm a junior in a high school with an English, like Cambridge-based program curriculum. So my question is, if I want to apply to a US university, do I still need that test to prove my English knowledge?
That's a great question.
Diploma at the end.
It's going to vary. It's going to vary from one school to another. So some universities, are you going to be doing A levels?
Yes.
Okay, so some universities will say, okay, if you've done A levels, you do not need to submit, a TOEFL test or something. Other universities might say you do still have to do TOEFL. Everyone's going to be totally different. That's something you'll want to check. Now, that earlier I mentioned that the universities generally do not publish the GPA requirements. But what we do publish is the English requirements. So most universities are going to have the English proficiency requirements very clearly stated on the website. And so they'll say, okay, TOEFL score of 80 or IELTS of this or A-level, whatever, right? And so that's something you can search on each school's website, or of course you can ask. And then some schools will, if you request, they will do an interview with you. You might say, hi, I've studied in English my whole life, or I did A levels. Could you schedule an interview for my English proficiency? And some schools will do that, and you can request it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Another thing for you to consider too is that for many schools, we will give you college level credit for your A levels. So this is an interesting situation with the British system. Is that the British system is to do, if you do A levels, is to do 13 years of school and then 3 years of university. But in the US, we do 12 years of school and then 4 years of university, right? So it kind of doesn't match up. And so A level is considered above what is needed for university admission in the US. And so you can get college credit. And that can be a big help for you because, say, just for example, say you did A-level biology. And then when you start the university, you might start with 8 credits of biology, and then you can skip the first biology course in the university, or maybe even the first 2. And so if you're a biology major or a pre-med major or something, that gives you like a head start, and then you can jump ahead into the more advanced biology courses, and that will help you. In some cases, you may even be able to graduate in less than 4 years. Or it could open you up to have more flexibility in the classes that you choose, right? So it could give you more freedom to choose classes that you're interested in because you already have those credits and that you don't have to be on a strict schedule for your courses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's an interesting point. Thank you for the thorough explanation.
You're welcome. And another thing to think about too is, in university, if you're applying to a school that has lots and lots of international students, they'll be very familiar with your Cambridge credentials, right? Because Cambridge is very common around the world. So, but if you're applying to a smaller college that does not have many international students, it's possible that they're not very familiar with it. And so it's worth it for you to send messages to the admissions team and just, you could say, hi, I have Cambridge credentials. Are you familiar with these? Please let me know if you need any help in understanding them or something like that. It's a good conversation to have.
Ethan, could you
Yes.
please maybe tell them is what is the best time for you to maybe talk to them sometimes, because we're gonna have to kind of wrap this up because we have another presentation in about 5 minutes
Okay,
on a same Zoom account. So obviously we can't have two at the same time. Is there like a good time for you to maybe have like a little interviews with them, or maybe mock interviews? I know some of our students had some scheduled and they're terrified.
okay, sure.
Yeah, we have done some mock interviews with them, but we're not admissions officers, so they're not like certain that if we tell them that they're okay with these interviews, that they're really okay.
Yeah, no problem. I'd be happy to. I think the best way would be to send me an email
Yes,
and I
definitely.
could schedule it individually. And my email there on the screen. Feel free to email me anytime. And this is my office number, so if you want to call me or leave a voice message, that's okay too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, this was a great presentation. Thank you so much. I know this is the first contact we have with you, right? Well, I had one contact with you before, and I thought you were like, this person looks like a great person to talk to. And we kind of picked you for this presentation. Tomorrow we have probably, you know her, Carol. So we have a
Carol from
presentation.
St. Paul?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, great. Okay.
Yeah, we wanted to
so-
have like this good combination of community college, because maybe some of our students, and they have been asking about it, maybe going to community college and then transferring. So we wanted a good combination of university as well as the community college.
Yep,
So
that's
yeah,
a great idea. Great.
yeah. So I think we're at the end. So thank you again so much for this presentation. It was awesome. And I guess we'll keep in touch. And I think that's about it.
Sounds great. Thanks to everybody for joining. It's my pleasure.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.